Welcome, everyone, to the Wilmot Institute's second web talk with Todd Lawson about the Bab's work, the Bahá'u'lláh. And today he will be presenting a talk titled Blessed Beauty in Islam, Joseph as Divine Manifestation. I already introduced Todd last week, so I perhaps should cut through this a little more quickly. He's been a Baha'i since 1968, a member of the Association for Baha'i Studies since 1975, has a PhD from McGill, if I remember right, and has been teaching at the University of Toronto, in Toronto, Ontario. He's published numerous books and articles. His degree, of course, is in Middle East Studies, but the Bab has always been a particular focus of his interest, the Bab and Bahá'u'lláh. And his book, Gnostic Apocalypse and Islam, focuses particularly on the Bahá'u'lláh, this book of the first revelation that the Bab made when he declared himself to Mullah Hussein in 1844. He's also been working on a book, Intimacy and Ecstasy in the Qur'an, in Qur'an commentary, and many other things too. If you find his website, you'll be quite excited to immerse yourself in his erudition. And certainly I have been quite blessed by being able to read some of his papers. Todd, you get better every year, I'll tell you. Really quite amazing, the things you write. So I won't delay this any longer, and we'll turn this all over to Todd so that he can begin his presentation today.
Thank you, Rob. Thank you for those very generous words. You know, Rob and I have been working together probably since 1975 or 6, something like that. I think we were both on the board of the Association of Baha'i Studies at the same time in the early days. And we've been in cahoots one way or another ever since, and it's always a pleasure to work with Rob. I recall one time we were at Greenacre together for a very, very beautiful few days with Heshmat Moayed, who was the speaker there. You remember that, Rob?
I'm trying to remember. Yeah, I think so. I remember Heshmat, of course, very dearly. God bless his soul.
Yeah. Okay, so today, I just have a question. I see on my screen only the name Rob Stockman, which is very nice to see. But is my screen working?
We don't have your images up yet. You have to click on Share Screen down at the bottom.
All right. But everything else is coming through.
Your voice is fine, and your image is coming through fine, yes.
Okay, great. So today, before we begin, I want to say how gratifying it is to read the feedback that's come through since our last meeting a couple of weeks ago. My wife and I just returned home last night from England, and I haven't had a lot of time or opportunity to read your comments, the comments of you who are out there in webinar land. But the ones that I have read have been extremely inspiring and gratifying. The connection that we're able to enjoy through this technology is really quite thrilling. So thank you for all of the input and for your suggestions and comments. It all goes into the hard drive, and hopefully it will come out of that hard drive in some sort of usable form at some state. Furthermore, if we have time, either this session or the next session, I would like to take a little time to look at some of those letters that have come in and some of the points that have been made that I think are very useful for all of us to ponder together. So it's a real privilege to be together with people who are so focused on the Bab. It goes without saying, of course, but working in academe, you don't always find people are as excited about the Bab and his writings as we are here. So it's like being in paradise for me. So let us carry on then and try and approach the what in the very beginning was a puzzle for not only Persian Islamic ulama, or not only a puzzle and in some cases an outrage, that is to say the Bab's writings, but also for the Western Orientalists who frequently, because they didn't have a deep knowledge of Shi'i Islam and a deep knowledge of such essential background information as the teachings and place of the Sheikh Ahmad and Sayyid Kazem and all of these things, were too hasty to call the Bab's writings, especially the Qayyum al-Asma, unintelligible and nonsense and all the rest of it. They may also have been somewhat influenced by the arch critics of the Babi movement as well. But however that may be, we now have enough experience with this text, which is, again, extremely unusual, unprecedented, not duplicable in any way. We have enough experience to know that they were all wrong, and that the work was a very powerful, eloquent, and persuasive, if you like, symphony of meaning for that first audience of believers. It grabbed them and captivated them and didn't let go, and is still the case. It still functions that way. That is not, the Qayyum al-Asma, of course, is not the only way to be grabbed and captivated and not let go. The Baha'i writings in English are quite capable of doing this, and at no time should it ever be assumed that it is necessary to know Arabic and Persian in order to appreciate and feel the beauty of the Baha'i revelation. That would be a very grave error. To know some Arabic and to know some Persian helps one understand aspects of the poetics of the Bab's writings that you simply don't get in the English. That's all there is to it. And these aspects are, in many cases, purely phonic. And note that we're not saying merely phonic, but purely phonic, because the sound is as important as the meaning for this audience that we are talking about. But that is what we don't get the sound, the shapes of the vowels and the consonants and so on, and the alliteration and the running of the fluency of the Qayyum al-Asma or any of the other writings of the Bab or Bahá'u'lláh or Abdul Baha. This Arabic language and the Persian poetic tradition is, frankly, centered very powerfully on the experience of beauty. And that, of course, is the main topic of our meeting today, is to try and come to terms with the idea of beauty. So it's a beauty from the point of view of the revelation generated by the sounds and the letters and the rhythms and the discursive or the meanings, the allusions, the intertextuality, and all of these things that just captivates the sensitive hearer or the person who's ready to hear it. Right. Beauty in the Islam of the Bab and Bahá'u'lláh and Abdu'l-Baha, and of course it's not news to anyone here to emphasize that the Bab, Bahá'u'lláh, and Abdu'l-Baha were in some sense Muslims through and through. They were sons of Islamic culture. They were pious believers. They all three had different personalities, of course, and they expressed their piety in different ways. But there was no doubt in any of their minds or hearts that Islam was a true religion from God, and that Muhammad was, upon whom be God's blessing and peace, was a true messenger from God, and the Qur'an was the word of God. And this is what makes a person a Muslim. But in addition to these beliefs, the thing we want to stress today is that it's not just belief. It is not just, well, as Baha'u'lláh says, think not that I have revealed unto thee a mere code of laws, correct? This is the point. It's yes, it is important to have a code of laws, and especially in the world given over to the kind of savagery we see around us, we need laws and moral standards. They need to be enforced, and people need to follow them. But obeying the laws are not what make the hearts of people sing. And we all know this. This aspect that makes the heart sing is what we're referring to by the word beauty. And it has a very long tradition in Islam. One can say that it is a central preoccupation of the Islamic religion. Now, there's another thing that arises when we talk about something as apparently subjective as beauty, is that the idea of beauty being culturally determined and culturally specific. And this, of course, is true. Standards and gauges of beauty vary all over the world. Some people's idea of beauty are other people's idea of the opposite of beauty, and so on. This we know. Some people call certain kinds of music beautiful, and other people would call the same type of music not beautiful, and so on and on and on. It's a very subjective or culturally specific value, beauty, in one sense. But in another sense, there is a universality to the notion of beauty that I think human beings relate to or know or feel, despite the subjectivity and the cultural specificity of it all. The Qur'an was revealed for humanity. It wasn't revealed for the Arabs or the Middle Easterners or any particular small parochial group. The word humanity, or if you like, mankind or man or human beings, there are 2 or 3 different words for these formulations, occurs hundreds of times in the Qur'an. And the Qur'an distinguishes itself from many other sacred scriptures by this preoccupation with the idea of humanity and mankind. This is very central. And while the Arabic of the Qur'an is obviously very culturally specific, and the music of it is very culturally specific, it also is the case that within less than 100 years from the first revelation of the Prophet Muhammad, which we date at the year 610 CE, Islam had spread all over the world, and you find people in vastly different cultural settings, and with all that implies, religion and language and diet and weather and on and on and on. But falling in love with Islam largely through two things, seems to me. One is the beautiful behavior of the Muslim teachers, traveling teachers, if you like, the da'is and the preachers and those people who came later to be identified as Sufis, who were frequently also merchants who moved to the far marches of the Islamic world and worked and practiced Islam and tried to be good Muslims and good human beings and follow the teachings of the Qur'an. There was beautiful behavior in the moral and ethical sense. And then there was also the beauty of the vision of humanity that the Qur'an taught. That is, it made sense out of all of these otherwise apparently vying and this chaotic jumble of religions that surrounded us in the 7th century. And they all seemed to be saying different things, but they were all talking about God, and it was impossible to solve this. The Qur'an solves the problem in a beautiful and elegant way, and in an entertaining way, in a way that might be compared to the epic genre of poetry. Although the Qur'an is not poetry, remember, it is not permitted to see it as poetry within Islam, but it is not permitted to be seen as poetry, not because it is not poetic. It is not permitted to be seen as poetry because the Prophet Muhammad was not a poet. And the poet occupied a lesser rung in the hierarchy of the social order. And the poet was not responsible to live up to the teachings that may or may not be found in the poetry. And his poetry was for sale. He would write a poem for anybody as long as he got paid for it, and on and on. And the topics of some of the beautiful pre-Islamic Arabic poetry were not in line with what we generally think of prophecy and revelation should be concerned with. But this doesn't mean, just because the prophet was not a poet, a status that was socially and culturally constructed by his society, that what he had to say was not poetic. And this is the third realm from which beauty emerges. It is the poetry and the music of the Arabic. So these three, there's undoubtedly more areas where beauty emerges now this might strike some people as odd, what I'm going to say now, but as a central sacramental value in Islam. It is through beauty that the believer is attracted to God and receives the kind of nourishment that is necessary to keep the believer on the straight path or the righteous path, however you wish to withstand the various tests and difficulties. Beauty is one of the things that keeps people in the game. And the Qur'an, quite apart from being beautiful, quite apart from being what we might think of as its as both instrument and music of this new symphony of meaning. The Qur'an also uses and refers to beauty in numerous verses as something that is simultaneously human preoccupation and as a kind of a gateway to a deeper understanding of the divine and the ways of the divine. There are numerous passages to this effect, and I have just 3 or 4 or 5 that show some of this. But another thing that we might think about as a way of coming to terms with and understanding for ourselves the beauty of the Qayyum al-Asma is to engage with the Qur'an and to read the Qur'an in a good English translation. There are many. And for those of us who can read the Arabic, to read the Arabic of the Qur'an aloud to oneself, but to know what the meanings are as well, not just to be concerned only with the music. There is needless to say, excruciatingly profound meaning in the Qur'an, a great deal of which is shared by the Baha'i dispensation and confirmed and repeated. So this, if a number of the letters that came since the last webinar were pursuing the problem of how can a person who does not have Arabic understand and appreciate the great artistic achievement that the Qayyum al-Asma was and is. And I think one thing that you could do would be to read the Qur'an backwards and forwards. And then in English or any other translation you wish to, I mean, I can send in a list of some of the good translations in English and in French and a couple of other languages. The English, I imagine, is the one that most of us here in this cyber room are familiar with. But then another thing you could do would be to learn rudimentary Arabic pronunciation and spelling and the alphabet. You know, the alphabet is a lot easier than it looks. It's honestly, you can learn the alphabet in a week and a half. That I promise you, 2 weeks max. And the sounds of the letters and the words, and then to read, and after you've read the English Qur'an, to get one of those Qur'ans that has English on one side and Arabic on the other, and read to yourself the Arabic. This is the best possible preparation for reading the Qayyum al-Asma. And I only came to this realization through the questions that were circulated since the last talk. And so maybe, barring that, there are dozens and dozens of websites that will take you through the entire Qur'an. You can listen to it chanted by some of the most beautiful voices and readers in the world today through YouTube or other websites. So to listen to it and to immerse yourself in the Qur'an. But let's go back to the idea of beauty. It's important to be able to, even if you don't experience the beauty of the Qur'an, to understand that it is there to be experienced by people, and that this is what happens. When, you know, out of 6,000 verses in the Qur'an, 6,000, maybe 500 have to do with rules and regulations. I don't know what percentage that is, but it's not as much as one would think, given the emphasis on the law and the Sharia and all of these things that comes to us through other sources. So the vast majority of the Qur'an has to do with telling the story of humanity through various prophets, parables, prayers, and certain other types of expressions, beautiful poetic descriptions of God or allusions to God, these kinds of things. This is what the Qur'an is. Let me mention to you now, before I forget, a very important book on this question that was published, I guess, about 20 years ago now. It was written at first in German by an Iranian scholar named Navid Kermani, and it has since been translated into English, I guess, in the last 10 years or so. The title of the book is God is Beautiful, and it is all about the aesthetic aspects of the Qur'an. So the author's name is Kermani, Kermani, and the title of the book is God is Beautiful. It's a bit longer than it needs to be, but this is what happens to a lot of academic stuff. But you will find, I think, if you take the trouble to look at it, that this work offers us a really important insight into the aesthetic power and an understanding of the sacramental value of beauty in Islam. Now, many people would argue against the use of the word sacrament, but I'm using the word somewhat figuratively and somewhat literally. If we look up the meaning of the word sacrament, it, I believe, says something along these lines. It's an action usually administered by a priest, which makes the reality of the divine present in the world. That is to say, people feel a charged atmosphere or feel that there's a real connection with the divine. From that point of view, beauty there are sacraments in Islam, and beauty is definitely one of them. Other example of things of sacramental value in Islam are precisely community. Community is not just a problem to be solved or something to get a handle on, but the idea of a thriving and growing and prospering community reflects the goodness and mercy of God, so brings the presence of God into the picture. That's what a sacrament does. So we're saying here that beauty is a sacramental value in Islam, and I think we should always put quotation marks around the word sacrament because generally speaking, Islam doesn't see itself as having sacraments, but I think we get the picture. I'd like to share with you now a few passages from the Qur'an that help understand the notion of beauty. Now, these passages from the Qur'an are in an order that was arranged for another presentation, but I think we'll get the picture. One of the aspects of beauty, which is evident, or which is resonant in the Greek idea of creation or the universe, namely cosmos, is the idea of the interconnectedness of all things. This is a, if you like, a spiritual and scientific fact, but it also is a very satisfying apperception to have. It is aesthetically pleasing, right? So this first verse that I'm quoting here for us is says that everything is created from the same source. So there's a deep relationship amongst all created things in the cosmos or in the universe. Incidentally, since we do have some Arabic here, I'd like us all to think about the different message sent out by the Arabic script in distinction to the Latin script here. What is the first thing that we see as a major difference, quite apart from one is read from right to left and the other left to right? But what is the, if you like, the vibe that you get from looking at the Arabic and as a different from the vibe you get from looking at the Latin script? We can think about that. I'll go on to the next slide if this thing works. And of course it doesn't. Is that it? Oh, I see. I see. Okay. Okay. Human variety is created by God. Had thy sustainer so willed, he could surely have made all mankind one single community. But he willed it otherwise, and so they are in different communities. This is in connection with the fact that despite the various communities, at essence, all humanity is created from the same thing. As the Qur'an says elsewhere, everything has been created from water. Our basic substrate is water. So this gives us irrefutable connectedness. Human variation is a mode of revelation. And among his wonders is the creation of the heavens and the earth and the diversity of your tongues and colors. For in this, behold, there are messages indeed for all who are possessed of knowledge. Human variation is also a source of knowledge. O mankind, behold, we have created you all out of a male and a female, and have made you into nations and tribes, so that you might come to know one another. Verily, the noblest of you in the sight of God is the one who is most deeply conscious of him. Behold, God is all-knowing, all-aware. Can everyone see all the references here, like the surah and verse number, if you want to look at these things later?
Yes, we can see them.
Are they visible?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Where now what? Oh, I see. I have to close this. Now, this is the key verse. I think we mentioned it last time as well. This is the key verse called the verse of the covenant, or the verse of the day of Alas, which is the single most powerful statement vis-a-vis the apparent chaos of religions that Muhammad's audience was aware of at the time of his revelation. In addition to humanity being a main theme of the Qur'an, also religious multiplicity is a big theme in the Qur'an. It mentions Jews and Christians and others as well, and different types of human beings within the Arabian context. So there was multiplicity. So this is why when we read this particular verse, we are struck. How can all of those various, that intense variety of humanity, people who appear to have nothing in common, where is the hope? And it is in this verse that the hope resides, and elsewhere in the Qur'an as well. Recall when thy Lord or sustainer brought forth their offspring from the loins of the children of Adam. He thus called upon them to bear witness about themselves. Am I not your sustainer? To which they answered, Yea, indeed, we do bear witness thereto. Of this we remind you, lest you say on the day of resurrection, verily we were unaware of this, that is to say, the judgment. Or lest you say, verily it was but our forefathers who in times gone by began to ascribe divinity to other beings beside God, and we were but their late offspring. Wilt thou then destroy us for the doings of those inventors of falsehoods? And this is a very good example, forgive me, pronouncing the Qur'an to be good and all the rest of it. But here we have information or knowledge being revealed, knowledge which is beautiful in itself, because what it's saying is that despite of all the differences that you see amongst you now, the Jews and the Christians, the Zoroastrians and the people from that tribe and this tribe, and people who are disbelievers and people who are believers and all the rest of it, despite that, there was a time in the spiritual realm before creation when we were all together in peace and harmony and unity in the presence of our Lord, thy sustainer, mentioned here. So this is the information. But it's also said in a beautiful way. The Arabic is, quite apart from looking beautiful and deeply connected in a way that the English doesn't, and flowing from right to left, the rhyme and the harmony and the rhythm of the sounds is overwhelming to the first and continuing audiences of the Qur'an. So this is a reality of Islam that is frequently not mentioned or noticed. So it is this day of resurrection, or the day of the covenant, this is called, which occurred in a time before time, in a place before place was created, when God brought forth all future generations and presented this great existential question, am I not your Lord? And they all immediately answered, yea, verily. We know this, the beauty of this is also a great feature of the Qayyum al-Asma, because as we mentioned last time, this yea, verily, yea, indeed, is represented by a single word in Arabic, this bala here, if you see. And the abjad value is 42. The 111 surahs of the Qayyum al-Asma, all 111 are structured along the number of 42, so that the recital of the Qayyum al-Asma is a replay of this primordial, before time and place, spiritual event of the day of the covenant, when the question, am I not your Lord, was presented to all humanity that would ever live. So this is a very operatically beautiful, overwhelmingly beautiful aspect of the revelation. In the Qayyum al-Asma, the further point made rather miraculously, if you like, or certainly in a wondrously new fashion, is the insight, because what the Bab is saying in the Qayyum al-Asma is that this is a replay of or a re-performance or a reiteration of the original day of the covenant, but it is coupled with precisely the day of resurrection that's mentioned in the same verse. So it is simultaneously the primordial ancient day of the covenant and that future day of resurrection are brought together in the Qayyum al-Asma in an exceedingly powerful fashion. So this is not a mere code of laws that we're dealing with here. I'm not looking at the clock, people. I don't know where we are. Tell me, somebody, how much time do we have?
Another 15, 20 minutes. You're 2:44.
Okay. Thank you. So, another important teaching of the Qur'an is that every human community has had a divine messenger, as we see here. Now, every community has had an apostle, and only after their apostle has appeared is judgment passed on them in all equity, and never are they wronged. 1047. And never have we sent forth any apostle, that's the term Rasul here, otherwise than with a message in his own people's language, so that he might make the truth clear unto them. Truth is not tricky, but God lets go astray him that wills to go astray, and guides him that wills to be guided, for he alone is almighty, truly wise. So every human community has had a divine message, and every divine message has been in the clear language of that community. From this standpoint, the Prophet Muhammad is the most recent, and according to some of the interpretations of the Qur'an by the followers of Muhammad, the very last one that would ever exist. As you know, Bahá'u'lláh refers to the Prophet Muhammad as the seal of the prophets in more than one place. So there's a wisdom and a truth in this designation, but we won't linger over it at the moment. So the Qur'an, the idea of humanity is expanded from what was current previously. It's no longer merely linguistic or merely racial or tribal or ethnic. All humanity shares the same epic history and is on the same epic journey from creation to revelation to judgment and rebirth, if you like, or transformation or resurrection. The epic poet is the prophet, and the epic poem is the revelation. So this idea of the poetry of revelation comes through even without referring to the actual music of the Arabic language. It's just the sense of what is being taught is captivating in itself, that there was a time when all humanity was together in peace and harmony in the presence of God. In fact, if you read that verse and study it and think about it, I think it pretty soon becomes quite obvious that that's Surah 7, verse 172, that even though God is mentioned in the verse as our Lord, Rabb, and this word is very important because of the connotations it has for the office of the holder of the office of Lord, because the word Rabb, related to the Hebrew word Rabbi or rabbi, has to do with nurturing and cultivating and caring for people, educating people, tarbiyah and so on. Rabb is a very special name of the divine or God. While God is mentioned in the name of Lord or Sustainer, as that translator has it, it's also obvious that God's presence in this verse is not the most noteworthy or exciting thing about the verse. What is really captivating is that all humanity is together. And this is clearly seems the main point of this verse, is that it has happened in the past, therefore it can happen again, you see. And as we know, Islam re-performs this great meeting of humanity every year with the Hajj, when people from all over the Islamic world, which is the world now in many ways, come together, different races and languages and so on, and however much there are things about it that don't appeal to modern tastes and all the rest of it. The point is that it does bring all of these people together on a massive scale, and in a sort of recreation of this original moment of human harmony and peace and order. Harmony, peace, and order are features of beauty, it's being suggested or argued here. Let me see. So in some senses, the prophet is a storyteller. And this distinguishes the role of the prophet from other, perhaps, roles. In any case, this is a quotation which I think is quite apposite. The storyteller joins the ranks of the teachers and sages. He has counsel not for a few situations, as the proverb does, but for many, like the sage. For it is granted to him to reach back to a whole lifetime, a life, incidentally, that comprises not only his own experience, but no little of the experience of others. What the storyteller knows from hearsay is added to his own. His gift is the ability to relate his life, his distinction to be able to tell his entire life. Storyteller, he is the man who could let the wick of his life be consumed completely by the gentle flame of his story. This is the basis of the incomparable aura about the storyteller. Storyteller is the figure in which the righteous man encounters himself. And this, it seems, is the humanity of the prophet as storyteller was communicated through the story that he told in the Qur'an of the epic journey of humanity from the day of the covenant, before time and history began, and when history and consciousness, according to Islam, came alive or were born, throughout the travails and the triumphs of humanity in various times and places. It is a pre-Baha'i era telling of the idea of progressive revelation. And it is something that the Baha'i faith goes to some great length to teach to the rest of the world, this deep connectedness from being created from the same water, the deep similarity in experience, which is, again, not merely facts and information, but knowledge. And knowledge may be distinguished from mere information as that which has an aura of the sacramental beauty about it. And thinking about the way in which the Bab brought together the Day of the Covenant with the Day of Resurrection in the same, if you like, literary gesture, caused me to think of another beautiful iteration of the same, which is known to many of us already, but which I would like to show now if I can get the PowerPoint to behave itself. And to get the idea of the beauty of this particular message in this famous excerpt from T.S. Eliot's Four Quartets, if I can find it. And I can't. Why is that? Here it is. So this is the end of the Four Quartets. We shall not cease from exploration, and the end of all our exploring will be to arrive where we started and know the place for the first time. And all shall be well, and all manner of things shall be well. When the tongues of flames are enfolded into the crown knot of fire, and the fire and the rose are one. Thank you for your attention.
This is fascinating to see the accounts in the Qur'an, the various passages in the Qur'an that all point to humanity. And I was wondering if you wanted to tie this a little more to the divine Joseph, which was also part of the title. You probably did a lot of that last week, but since Joseph represents beauty in particular, I was thinking you might want to make that connection.
Yeah.
People.
Well, thank you. Yes, I mean, you've said it. You know, Joseph is the manifestation of divine beauty in the Qur'an and in Islamic letters and culture. And Joseph is mentioned. The idea of beauty is also mentioned. It appears. So this is, and the beauty, husn or hasan, is a beauty of particular kind that bespeaks harmony and cosmos and order and irresistibility. It shares with other words for beauty certain aspects, but the idea of the peaceable prophet is embodied in Joseph, because as we mentioned last time, Joseph did not, when he had the chance and possibly every good reason to punish and his brothers and so forth, chose to forgive them.
Right.
And this is a beautiful gesture of harmonious, peaceful living together that Joseph represents. Thanks for giving me a chance to point that out. Mm-hmm. In a sense, wherever beauty is mentioned, Joseph is also mentioned or thought. Mm-hmm. I think I shared with you the last time that the Hadith from the Prophet, I'll say it again. According to the Hadith, Prophet Muhammad said, God created beauty, and he used the word husn or hasan in 100 parts, and he bestowed upon Joseph 99. Huh. You see, so this is how Joseph is understood. So it's not, and his point is, it's not just visual eye candy beauty that we're talking about. We're talking about the deep beauty of the interconnectedness of the universe and the divine imagination and all of these things for which Joseph is the exemplar. You know.
So that's a hadith.
Yes.
Hadith. That's a good one to remember.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
So just to finish up, the Bab's audience and the audience, Bahá'u'llah's audience, were preconditioned to be sensitive to the expression of beauty as a divine sacrament. as an evidence of the not only existence of God, but the presence of God. Mm-hmm. And again, despite the fact that beauty is something that is culturally specific and subjective and all the rest of it, the idea of beauty is not. The idea of beauty is universal.
Sure.
So this is, the people were overwhelmed by the beauty of the proclamation. And it was a beauty that was innovative and risk-taking and radically challenging. That is to say, badi', new, improvisatory. But because it was beautiful, it was also rooted in the day of the covenant before time and place. So it's simultaneously sempiternal and atomically new, if you like. And they caught this. The Letters of the Living caught this. They saw this in the Bab's Bahá'u'lláh. Yeah.
Interesting. And some mullahs obviously did too, because they read portions of it and immediately recognized the claim to revelation.
That's right. Yeah, they did. Yeah. That very important article by Mujan on Mullah Ali Bastami's trial in Iraq is, we should probably put it up, because that's where the combined fatwa Sunni and Shi'i courts in Baghdad agreed together that what the Bab had produced was a new Qur'an. Yeah. This is a very important thing.
Yeah.
And I think Mujan's article is online, and if you need it, I can send you a copy.
Yeah, most likely it's online, and it certainly should be. It's been around a while, so it's.
Oh yes.
Dates back to the 90s, it seems to me.
Yeah, that's right. The Day of the Covenant has been around a while too.
Yeah. I don't know if I have any questions yet. Several people responded to your question, how do you compare the Arabic and the English? And people said the Arabic is much more concise, takes less space. The English translation is much longer.
That's interesting, yeah. Because that's a value of Arabic writing, concision. This is one of the miraculous qualities of the Qur'an, the ability to say a great deal in a very, very few words.
And that's probably also helps to explain why there are many places where words are added in brackets.
Yes.
In order to fill out the translation.
Absolutely, yeah. Yeah, and 9 times out of 10, people wouldn't disagree with, people who know Arabic wouldn't really disagree with those added words.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah.
I don't see any questions yet, anything that's new here.
Okay.
Do you have any particular comments from the class that you wanted to?
Well, let's see. There's some chat things that are coming in. Arabic is shorter and more concise.
Right.
That's silly coincidence, perhaps not.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I guess you must have mentioned a verse 42.
Oh, I see.
Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy.
Oh, 42 is the number of the word Bala. That is to say, yes, indeed. When God says, am I not your Lord? The B-L-A adds up in abjad numeration, or whatever it is, to the number 42. Oh, I didn't know this about Hitchhiker.
The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy was right. That is the answer to life in a way.
The Arabic flows, someone says, and is more orderly. Perhaps it is the English font, because English can be calligraphy, yes, but the Arabic is superior. Well, it certainly gives a sense of connectedness, the Arabic script, and it's so beautiful. And even if you don't understand it, you see it, you can feel the rhythm of the script, and it's quite an achievement, this Arabic writing.
And the sound of it too, the rhyming prose of Arabic is really quite powerful.
Indeed.
Someone asked for the name of Mujan's document again, and you were talking about, I'm not sure which one she's referring to, the one about Ali Bastami's trial, maybe.
Yeah, I think so. I can easily send the title in.
Yeah, that would be good.
Where can we get? Now, let me say. This question has arisen several times.
Yes.
One of them. Where can we get complete Bob's work in English? I can only find excerpts. There are only excerpts. There are some complete works that were translated into French around the beginning of the 20th century. And they are, I mean, they're useful, but some of them have misidentified certain works of the Bab and so on. It's a project that the World Center is working on. And I think as time goes by, you will see more authorized translations of the Bab's writings in English. But as it stands now, to answer the question, you cannot get the complete Bab's work in English. You should know, friends, that the Bab, on his own counting, wrote over 500,000 verses. 500,000, 500,000 verses. We have a lot of what he wrote in various libraries throughout the world and at the World Center, of course. But we don't even have all of the Arabic and Persian writings that he wrote. So to have a complete collection of the Bab's works in English is going to take a while.
Right.
But the more of you who study Persian and Arabic and Islamic studies and poetry and all of these things, the sooner we will have them.
That's right.
Everyone can contribute.
We don't even have all of the major works of the Bab available, published and printed in Persian and Arabic.
That's correct.
We often have just manuscripts, including the Qayyum al-Asma itself. We just have manuscripts.
No, that's not true. We have a printed edition.
Oh, that's true. There's a printed edition that was published in Damascus or Lebanon or something. That's right.
In Damascus. Yes.
Damascus. Yeah.
Yeah. In fact, it's available for free online. You can download it if you want to and get a copy. I think somebody sent in the link to it in our conversation group. Does the Qur'an make explicit reference to God as the beautiful? No, but the Hadith certainly does. And the Qur'an certainly makes reference to the creation of God as being beautiful and compelling and convincing proof of God, shall we say. I find that Baha'u'lláh makes frequent mention of this attribute, yes. And often in the context of the story of Joseph, as you mentioned. Oh, yes. Thank you. Can you say more about the psychology of reading divine revelation aloud? Well, it's only in the last 300 years that people started not reading aloud. People always read aloud because they liked the sound of the reading, and it was thought to be a more complete experience. So, and as you know, Rahia Khanum, in her Priceless Pearl, said that the guardian told her on more than one occasion that he wrote his work to be read aloud. That there was a musicality to the writings of the guardian, which might not be immediately clear to everyone who's aware of the guardian's work. But if you read it aloud, you'll see that there is this beautiful music and rhythm and cadence to the guardian's writing. So it's because reading aloud brings in precisely the music and the sounds of it, and these are important aspects of cognition and perception, which go into making judgments and interpretations.
One person asks in the question and answer, the idea of the covenant at the beginning of time and creation, is that the same as Baha'u'llah's reference to the time when we were all together? I think that's in the hidden words.
19, hidden word 19 Persian.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, it is. And Abdu'l-Baha makes it clear that there are other meanings as well with this hidden word, but that is primary amongst them. We're all gathered beneath the tree of Anisa, right?
A life, I guess, yeah.
No.
Another text came in from Ramteen. I read the excerpts and found numerous amounts of praise of God, and there is no other God but God. What does that mean?
Very, very astute, Ramteen. It's a good example of what one scholar called the paradox of monotheism. The kind of a logical problem. Historically, what it means is fairly simple and straightforward to put across. I see we're running out of time, so I better hurry up. The main context for the revelation of Islam is seen by Muslim historians and by outside observers as the polytheism of the Arabian Peninsula. The Prophet Muhammad was sent a message in order to obliterate the polytheism and bring about the belief in the one God. So that's the basic idea. And the unity that Islam cultivated and produced and made real and on the social and communal level is felt to be a reflection of the divine unity that the Prophet was called upon to reinstate.
There's also another Zoom chat here from Farhad. Do you agree with the translation of Jamal as beauty? And I suppose it raises the question, how is Jamal different from Husn?
Oh, well, Husn relates more to the moral aspect of beauty, or moral and ethical aspect of beauty, and Jamal to the more visual, let's see, aesthetic, purely aesthetic ideas of beauty. But they interact. They can each mean the opposite as well, given depending upon the context that the words are used. But the basic semantic charge of Jamal has more to do with the experience of the visually beautiful. It's one of the attributes of God. Now that you mention it, person asked about this, especially in the Sufi tradition, the Jalal of God and the Jamal of God, the overwhelming power and compellingness of the divine, in addition and in tandem with his attracting beauty. And in that context, God is also considered beautiful, explicitly considered beautiful.
And then Taraz says, does the term blessed beauty come up in Islam or in the revelation of the Bab?
Excellent question. I tell you, I can't answer the question. I don't know. I mean, no, I don't know. Sorry, Taraz.
Interesting question. And Lena says, Lena Zane.
Lena. Hello.
Yes, I'm sure you know her too. Todd, would you consider a webinar on the meaning or link or bridge between the primordial covenant, Baha'u'llah's covenant, and the concept of resurrection?
Yes, I would. Lena, now that you've spoken and made yourself visible, I wanted to say that here is another book that is very important for people to know about. Can you see this?
A concordance of the Qur'an.
Of the Qur'an, and you see the author's name is Kasif. Hana Kassis. This is tied to the Arbery translation of the Qur'an.
Uh-huh.
And it will help the person who does not know Arabic to track and find out how, for example, how many times does the Qur'an mention love? How many times does the Qur'an mention women? How many times does the Qur'an mention family, peace, all of these things? There's no book like it in existence. I mention it now that Lena has made herself known because the author of this book, who was my very first teacher of Islamic studies, when he found out I was a Baha'i, he said, "Oh, I have to tell you, the person that I learned the most about what it means to be human was my Baha'i professor at AUB, American University of Beirut, Zain, Lena's father."
Yeah, her father.
And I was very touched when he shared that with me now 50 years ago or whenever it was. And when Lena, her name comes up, or her brother, I always think of it again. And it was very impressive to me that this Palestinian Christian great scholar of the Qur'an was so influenced by the great Baha'i scholar, Zain. That's
a great story.
Yeah.
I'm sure she and Ramsey are very happy to hear it too. Karen Webb says, "Can you elaborate on learning the Arabic alphabet in 2 weeks? I am doing something really wrong."
Well, it would be helpful to have a teacher, but you could. I haven't looked into it, but I'm sure that online there are Arabic courses. The thing, if it takes 3 weeks, don't sue me. The thing I would like you to all know is that it's not as difficult as it looks. It really isn't. You just have to get used to the idea of sounds being represented by different markers. That's all. And this you can overcome quite early. You can make yourself flashcards of the Arabic alphabet and go through them. If I come across a good course online to teach the Arabic alphabet, I will send it out to the course meister here, and he can share it with everybody.
The Wilmot Institute is thinking of doing a course to teach the Arabic language and a course to teach the Persian language at some point in the future.
Okay.
We would love to do it.
Yeah.
Have to get the right people to teach it.
That's true. There are a lot of very talented people that would be happy to do it, I'm sure.
Yeah, I think so too. Paul Mantle asks this question: is there much mention in the Qur'an itself, in the story of Joseph in the Qur'an, to the coat of many colors?
It's not referred to as the coat of many colors in the Qur'an. It's called the shirt of Joseph, or the cloak, qamis. But that's my answer. Yeah. But in the exegetical tradition, the sort of midrash of the Qur'an, the tafsir tradition, it is talked about by various authors and described in different ways in that literature. But the Qur'an itself, what comes through in the Qur'an is that the shirt was given to Joseph by his father and made his brothers jealous. So there was something.
That's all of our questions at the moment.
Okay.
Don't see any more. We had a good run here of questions too, I will say. Some very interesting questions.
Well, thank you everyone for your kind patience and overlooking the choppiness of the presentation and all of these things. I look forward to the next meeting. I will send you my translation of Surah 1 of the Qayyum al-Asma that you can read before, if you like, before the meeting. So that's going to be the whole topic of the meeting, what it was about this document that convinced Mullah Hussein that the Bab was who he was looking for.
How long is the first surah? 20 or 30 pages?
No, 42 verses.
42 verses.
700-800 words. Yeah.
That's quite short then.
Yes. Yes.
That's interesting. And Bill just said he noticed that the Quran 17:110, to him belong names most beautiful. But that
Absolutely.
was 100, the 99 beautiful names of God. Yeah.
This is mentioned many times in the Quran, the most beautiful names of God. In the context of to God belong the most beautiful names. Whichever one you choose to call upon him, that's fine. Don't worry. Don't be too hung up about having the right theology to refer to God. But the word for beautiful here is the same as the word for beautiful in the instance of Joseph, Hassan. So, and as you know, it was one of the names of the prophet's grandchildren,
right?
Hussein and Hassan,
right?
Who are very important in the story of the prophet's life. You know.
And that's a common, I mean, you also have Hosni and Mohsen, right?
Oh,
so
yes.
Versions of that name as well.
That's right. Yep, absolutely. Ihsan and
Ihsan too, yeah.
Yeah, it all has to do with the idea of beauty and goodness, harmony. Yeah.
And someone asked us about a link to the Surah of Joseph that he's offered to send us. Yes, for people who aren't in the course, I suppose we can put it up on the web page for the web talk, if that's all right with you.
Sure. What are we putting up?
I'm saying that this translation of the first Surah of Joseph, there are people who are, of course, participating here who aren't in the course. So they would like to see it as well. Okay.
That one. My translation of the first chapter.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. And that's fine with me.
Okay.
The provisional translation, everybody.
Right. Of course. We'll mark it provisional to remind people as well.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Todd. This has really been fascinating and, as usual, very engaging. And we're looking forward to seeing you in 2 weeks.
Thank you. Likewise.